The story opens on a warm August night in 1974 in the Florentine countryside. A young couple, Stefania Pettini and Pasquale Gentilcore, drive their small Fiat down a dark country road lined with cypress trees, searching for a secluded spot. They're laughing, the radio playing softly, completely unaware they're being watched. They park near an abandoned vineyard. The atmosphere is romantic until Stefania notices a shadow moving between the trees. Before she can speak, gunshots shatter the windscreen. The opening establishes immediate terror as the killer approaches the car with deliberate, methodical steps. Pasquale is already dead. Stefania tries to run but doesn't make it far. The killer's face remains hidden in darkness. This brutal scene sets the tone and raises the first question. Who is hunting lovers in the Tuscan hills? The narrative then pulls back to establish the timeline, revealing this isn't the first attack. In 1968, another couple, Barbara Loci and Antonio Lobianco, were murdered in similar circumstances near a cemetery in Signa. Barbara's 6-year-old son, Natalino, was found wandering alone, traumatized, clutching his mother's purse. He told police he saw a man, but his testimony was confused and fragmented. The authorities initially focused on Barbara's husband, Stefano Mele, a jealous Sardinian laborer with a violent temper. Under interrogation, Stefano confessed, but his story kept changing. He implicated his friends, other Sardinian men who'd been involved with Barbara. The investigation became muddled with accusations, counter-accusations, and small-town gossip about Barbara's reputation. Stefano was convicted, but questions lingered. The same gun, a .22 caliber Beretta, would appear again. 6 years of silence followed until Stefania and Pasquale's murders in 1974. The police realized the weapon matched the 1968 killings. Fear rippled through Florence. Young couples who once sought privacy in the countryside now stayed in the city. Parents warned their children. The media began calling the perpetrator Il Mostro di Firenze, the Monster of Florence. But with Stefano Mele in prison, who was pulling the trigger? The story introduces Inspector Adolfo Izzo, a dedicated but increasingly frustrated detective assigned to the case. Izzo reviews the evidence repeatedly, searching for patterns. He notices the killer always strikes on moonless nights, always targets couples in parked cars, always uses the same weapon. The female victims suffer additional post-mortem mutilations that the police keep from the public. Izzo becomes obsessed, his marriage deteriorating as he works late into the night, walls covered with crime scene photographs and maps of attack locations. His wife, Lucia, pleads with him to come home, to sleep, to eat. He promises he will once he catches the monster. She asks him what if the monster can't be caught. He has no answer. In June 1981, the monster strikes again. Giovanni Foghi and Carmela Denuccio are murdered near Mosciano, a small village outside Florence. The 7-year gap had given people hope that perhaps the killer had died or moved away. Now terror returns with renewed intensity. The mutilations are worse this time. Izzo arrives at the crime scene at dawn, Ani watching the forensic team work in the golden morning light that seems obscenely beautiful against the horror before them. A young officer vomits in the bushes. Izzo doesn't blame him. He's seen 4 of these scenes now, and each one leaves him feeling hollowed out, angry, and helpless. The investigation expands. New detectives join, new theories emerge. Some believe it's a single killer with deep psychological trauma. Others suspect multiple perpetrators, perhaps the Sardinian men Stefano Mele had named years ago. Inspector Ruggiero Perugini becomes convinced the Sardinian connection is key. He tracks down Francesco Vinci, one of the men Stefano had implicated, finding him living quietly in a small apartment. Francesco is nervous, evasive, his hands shaking as he lights cigarette after cigarette. He denies everything but can't provide alibis for all the murder dates. Perugini arrests him, certain he has his man. The media celebrates. Florence breathes easier, but in September 1982, another couple dies. Paolo Minardi and Antonella Migliorini are murdered, while Francesco Vinci sits in prison. The city's relief turns to horror and confusion. If Vinci is innocent, then who? The police release him quietly, offering no apology. Vinci's life is ruined, neighbors whispering, employers refusing to hire him. He tells reporters he's being destroyed for crimes he didn't commit, but no one listens. The monster remains free. October 1981 brings another attack. Stefano Baldi and Susanna Cambi die near Calenzano. The killer is accelerating, the gaps between murders shortening. Izzo and his team work around the clock, but the monster leaves almost no evidence. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no physical traces beyond the bullets and the horror. Forensic psychology is still relatively new in Italy, but Izzo consults with Dr. Francesco Bruno, a criminal psychologist in Rome. Bruno profiles the killer as intelligent, organized, probably living a normal life that hides his compulsions. He likely revisits the crime scenes, reliving his acts. He feels power over life and death, treating his victims as objects rather than people. The profile helps, but doesn't identify anyone specific. Bruno warns that the killer will continue until he's caught or dies. There is no cure for what drives him. June 1982, another couple, Antonella Migliorini and Paolo Mainardi, die near Montespertoli. July 1984, Pierontini and Claudio Stefanacci are murdered near Vicchio. With each attack, public fear intensifies. Young people stop going to the countryside. Tourism drops. The mayor demands results. The police commissioner replaces lead investigators twice. Izzo remains on the case, but his authority is undermined. He drinks more, sleeps less. Lucia leaves him, taking their daughter. In the divorce papers, she writes that she's lost him to the monster, just as surely as if he'd been killed. The narrative introduces Mario Spezzi, a crime reporter for La Nazione newspaper, who has covered the case from the beginning. Spezzi is methodical, intelligent, deeply skeptical of official narratives. He builds relationships with investigators, reviews evidence, develops his own theories. Unlike the police who chase various suspects, Spezzi focuses on understanding the monster's psychology and patterns. He writes articles that are both informative and haunting, capturing Florence's collective fear while demanding accountability from authorities. Spezzi becomes convinced that the key to the mystery lies in the 1968 murders and Stefano Mele's original confession. In September 1985, the monster strikes for what will be the last time. French tourists Nadine Moriot and Jean-Michel Kravitchvili are camping near San Casciano when the killer finds them. The attack follows the familiar pattern, but with one difference. The killer removes a section of Nadine's body and sends it to the prosecutor's office in a taunting gesture. The brazenness shocks even hardened investigators. This is no longer just about killing. It's about mocking the authorities' inability to stop him. A massive investigation follows. Police set up roadblocks, question thousands of people, offer substantial rewards for information. Tips flood in but lead nowhere. Among those questioned is Pietro Pacini, a farmer from San Casciano with a violent history. Decades earlier, Pacciani had murdered a traveling salesman he found sleeping with his fiancée, stabbing him 19 times. He served 13 years for that crime. Later, he was convicted of molesting his daughters. Pacciani is crude, volatile, with a hair-trigger temper. But he's also been investigated and cleared before. The police let him go. Then the murders stop. Months pass, then years. No more attacks. The active investigation scales down, though the case remains officially open. Theories proliferate. Did the killer die? Move away? Get imprisoned for something else? Some investigators believe the killer was among those questioned after the final murder, and the scrutiny scared him into stopping. Others think he simply satisfied whatever dark compulsion drove him. The families of the victims demand answers but receive none. The story shifts to the 1990s. A new lead prosecutor, Pier Luigi Vigna, decides to reinvestigate the entire case with fresh eyes. He's ambitious, confident, convinced his predecessors missed something obvious. His team re-examines all the evidence, re-interviews witnesses, applies new forensic techniques to old materials. They keep returning to Pietro Pacciani. His farm is near several attack sites. His violent history fits the profile. His alibis are weak or non-existent. In 1991, police arrest Pacciani, searching his property for evidence. They find items that might link him to the crimes, though nothing definitive. The case against him is largely circumstantial, but Vigna believes it's enough. The trial of Pietro Pacciani begins in 1994 and becomes a media sensation. Cameras aren't allowed inside, but reporters pack the courthouse daily, broadcasting updates to a riveted nation. Pacciani presents as a rustic, crude man who seems incapable of the sophistication the crimes required, yet capable of extreme violence. The prosecution argues he's been hiding in plain sight for decades, a monster wearing a farmer's disguise. They present ballistics evidence, geographical analysis showing his proximity to the crime scenes, testimony about his violent nature and sexual deviancy. The defense argues the evidence is thin, on the investigation desperate to blame someone after years of failure. Pacciani himself is defiant, crude, claiming persecution. The testimony is graphic and emotional. Survivors' family members attend daily, some weeping, others staring at Pacciani with pure hatred. Izzo, now retired and gray, sits in the gallery every day. He's not sure Pacciani is guilty, but he wants closure. Mario Spezzi covers the trial extensively, his articles raising questions the prosecution can't adequately answer. If Pacciani is the monster, why did the killings span 17 years with long gaps? How did a barely literate farmer manage to elude sophisticated police work for so long? Why is there no physical evidence directly linking him to any victim? After months of testimony, the jury convicts Pacciani. The courtroom erupts. Some cheer, or others cry with relief. Pacciani shouts his innocence as guards lead him away. He receives life imprisonment. Florence celebrates cautiously. The monster is caught, justice served, the nightmare ended. But doubts linger. In 1996, an appeals court overturns Pacciani's conviction, citing insufficient evidence. The ruling shocks everyone. Prosecutors scramble. They develop a new theory. Pacciani didn't act alone. They identify Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti, two men who knew Pacciani, as possible accomplices. Both have criminal records and dubious alibis. Under pressure, Lotti confesses, describing in detail how he, Pacciani, and Vanni committed several murders together. His confession is vivid, disturbing, seemingly corroborated by facts only the killer would know. Based on this, both Vanni and Lotti are tried and convicted. Pacciani is scheduled for retrial but dies in 1998 before it begins, alone in his farmhouse, under suspicious circumstances that some believe was murder to silence him. But Mario Spezzi and others remain unconvinced. Lotti's confession contains inconsistencies. Some details match the crimes, but others are wrong in ways the real killer wouldn't be. Spezzi suspects Lotti was fed information by investigators desperate for convictions. He begins investigating more aggressively, publishing articles questioning the official narrative. His work attracts international attention. In 2000, American thriller writer Douglas Preston moves to Florence with his family, seeking inspiration in the beautiful Tuscan countryside. He befriends Spezzi and becomes fascinated by the Monster of Florence case. Preston has written best-selling novels about serial killers, but this real mystery captivates him differently. He decides to co-write a book about it with Spezzi, combining Spezzi's investigative journalism with Preston's narrative skills. They begin interviewing everyone connected to the case: retired investigators, forensic experts, witnesses, even some of the convicted men. Their investigation uncovers troubling inconsistencies. The ballistics evidence isn't as definitive as claimed. Witness statements were sometimes altered or coerced. The prosecution's timeline doesn't align with some established facts. Preston and Spezzi develop their own theory, believing the original 1968 murders hold the key and that the real monster might be someone never seriously investigated. They identify potential suspects among the Sardinian men from that era who are still alive and were never thoroughly cleared, but their investigation attracts unwanted attention. In 2006, a new prosecutor, Giuliano Mignini, takes an interest in the case. Mignini is brilliant but controversial, known for pursuing unconventional theories. He becomes convinced that the Monster of Florence killings weren't the work of a lone psychopath or even a small group, but part of a larger conspiracy involving a satanic cult that needed female body parts for black magic rituals. He believes wealthy, powerful Florentines were involved, orchestrating the murders while poor men like Pacciani took the fall. Mignini views Preston and Spezzi's investigation as interference or worse. In 2006, police arrest Spezzi, accusing him of planting evidence and obstructing justice. They raid his home, seize his files, interrogate him aggressively. Spezzi is terrified. He spent his career seeking truth and now faces criminal charges for doing exactly that. Preston, as an American citizen, can't be arrested, but is declared persona non grata and questioned as a suspect himself. The experience is surreal and frightening. Preston flees Italy, fearing arrest. He watches from America as his friend faces prosecution. The case against Spezzi eventually collapses. The evidence is non-existent, the charges clearly retaliation for his investigation. He's released, but the damage is done. His reputation is questioned, his health deteriorated from the stress. Preston writes about the experience in The Monster of Florence, published in 2008, which becomes an international bestseller. The book presents the entire saga, the original murders, the failed investigations, the questionable convictions, the conspiracy theories, and Preston and Spetsy's ordeal. It raises profound questions about justice, truth, and the dangers of authorities who refuse to admit they don't have answers. The story's final section examines the aftermath and lingering questions. Mario Vanni dies in prison in 2009, maintaining his innocence to the end. Giancarlo Lotti serves his sentence, his confession still disputed. The families of the 16 victims live with permanent grief and the uncertainty of never knowing for certain who killed their loved ones. Some believe Pacciani was guilty. Others think the real monster died unknown, or perhaps among the Sardinian suspects who were questioned and released in the early years. Inspector Izzo, now elderly and ill, sits in his Florence apartment surrounded by boxes of case files he kept copies of. He never married again after Lucia left. The monster took that from him too. He reviews the evidence one more time, as he's done countless times before, hoping something will suddenly make sense. It doesn't. He believes the truth died with someone decades ago, but can't prove it. The not knowing is worse than any confirmed horror. Mario Spezzi continues writing, though the experience changed him. He's more cynical about institutions, more aware of how easily truth can be distorted by those in power. He and Preston remain friends, bonded by their shared ordeal. They sometimes discuss the case, trading theories, but both know they'll likely never have definitive answers. The story concludes by returning to the Florentine countryside where it began. The hills and vineyards are peaceful now, beautiful in the golden afternoon light. Young couples again park on quiet roads, unaware or choosing to forget the horrors that once haunted these places. The older generation remembers. They lock their doors at night, avoid certain areas, speak of the monster in hushed tones. The case officially remains open, but no active investigation continues. The monster, whoever he was, is likely dead, but he succeeded in his final goal, remaining a mystery, a shadow, a terror that can't be fully understood or defeated. The question the story leaves the audience with isn't just who was the Monster of Florence, but what does it mean that despite all our technology, institutions, and investigative power, such evil can hunt among us for decades and never be truly known? What does it say about justice when convictions happen, but doubt remains? What do we owe the victims when we can't give them certainty? The story ends not with resolution, but with acknowledgement that some darkness resists illumination. Some questions have no satisfying answers, and sometimes the monsters win simply by remaining unknowable. Throughout the story, a call to action is woven in after the first dramatic section, establishing the horror. If this story troubles you, if it makes you think about justice and truth, subscribe to stay informed about cases like this that demand we not forget. Near the end, before the final reflections, another reminder: share this story. Comment with your theories. I help keep these victims remembered because forgetting is the final injustice. The story serves not to entertain, but to illuminate the profound complexity of evil, the fallibility of systems meant to protect us, and the courage of those like Spezzi and Preston who risk everything to pursue truth, even when institutions oppose them.